Hello and welcome to Nostalgia vs. Reality, where we take a look at the games that shaped my childhood and then rip them to shreds. Today we're looking at Mole Mania for the Game Boy. Mole Mania was released quite late in the Game Boy's life in 1997, and is probably the least known of the work of Shigeru Miyamoto. And quite honestly, it took me forever to even find out what the thing was called. I only remembered it as that game with the Sun Boss on the Game Boy. On a personal level, Mole Mania was one of the games that I got with my Game Boy when I first received it. I came pretty late to the party, and whoever was selling the thing to my parents was probably looking to get rid of it. Mole Mania was a huge financial flop. Nevertheless, it was the first Game Boy game I ever played, and just for that, my nostalgia is immense. But after spending some time with the game, it has actually held up pretty well. Like most games from this era, the premise of Mole Mania is paper thin. You play a mole whose wife and children are kidnapped, and you have to visit the kidnappers' crazed theme park / monster hangout to save them. Of course, each of them is conveniently placed in a level, and you have to rescue them from a boss of some sort. But where Mole Mania becomes really interesting is its gameplay. While it would have been pretty easy to just make another Mario-style platformer, what Miyamoto did with Mole Mania is he created a puzzle game. He created one of those push-pull puzzle games, and the game itself really just has a very basic set of mechanics. You can dig underground. You can go underground, and then pop back up to traverse the levels in ways that you couldn't when you're above ground, and vice versa. Sometimes you have to navigate the world above ground in ways you can't traverse it below ground. You can also drag and throw some of the items in the world, like cabbages and cannonballs, and that's how you solve the puzzles. Each room in the game has its very own exit block. All you have to do is find a way to drag or throw the cannonball into the exit block, and you're on to the next room. Each level is split up into a series of a ton of rooms, and each room represents a unique puzzle for the player to solve. Eventually, you'll make your way through all these rooms, and you'll get your way to the boss at the end of the level. These bosses do make use of the mechanics that you've learned while you've been playing the rest of the game. Most of them only require you to do, tunneling, dragging, and throwing, the mechanics that you've learned over time, but they have you do them in sort of unique yet obvious ways. For example, the first boss is a kangaroo that hops around, and you have to drag these spikes so that the kangaroo hops on them. In this way, they can create boss fights that are easy enough to figure out without having to have giant flashing weak points or any of the other bullshit that has emerged in recent years as ways to guide people. While the game sounds simple enough, and the early puzzles are pretty easy, the difficulty spikes hard as you get through the game. Some of the final puzzles are real head scratchers, and since you can visit any of the levels at any time after the first level, which acts as a sort of tutorial, it can be really confusing if you decide to skip to the later levels, because they do still teach mechanics throughout the other levels, although not as many. They really front-load it in the first level with tons of signs everywhere telling you exactly what to do. You still get signs in the later levels, but certainly not on that level. But it can still be confusing if say we did level 1 and we skipped to level 6. We're gonna have no idea what to do. Level 7 is blocked off until you beat the rest of the game, but all level 7 is a boss rush mode, which is not all that exciting. There's also a pretty huge problem with solving the puzzles, because when you go underground, you leave a hole on the surface, and things can fall in that hole. And of course, the problem is when a cannonball falls in the hole, it'll end up back at where it started. and that can lead to you completely breaking a room. You can completely break the puzzle, even to the point where you can't necessarily get out of the room anymore. Thankfully, EAD seems to have realized this was a problem during development, and they've put a menu option that allows you to restart the room. You can also exit the levels at any time, and when you go back, you'll start up at the room that you left off on. Of course, if each room was a puzzle, there wouldn't be any imminent threat of losing, something that was still key to video games at this point in time. So there are some arbitrary enemies scattered about the levels that make the puzzles quite a bit more difficult than they'd be if they weren't there. You've probably seen them, but so the idea is that you can throw the two things in the levels that you can throw are cabbages and cannonballs, and you can use either of them to kill the monsters. But cabbages also regenerate your health if you put enough of them in holes as you make your way through the level. Some of the cabbage can be hard to get to and put in holes, and so it sort of creates this dynamic of, do I want to risk taking the time and the effort to, get over to this cabbage and put it in holes, or do I want to just get through the level as soon as possible? And there's many rooms that don't even require you to kill any monsters. You can pretty easily just take the cannonball in the level and throw it at the exit block, and all the enemies in the room will die when you hit the exit block. So does Mole Mania hold up to my nostalgia for it? Out of the games I've played so far, I think Mole Mania is the first that is actually better than I remember it. That may be due to the fact that I could barely remember what the game was even called before now. But the puzzles remain extremely fun and challenging as time goes on, and the game itself is a good 10 hours long. And even better yet, if you're interested, it is available on the 3DS eShop, and other less savory means, of course. But if you do want to support this type of game, it's on the eShop. So that'll do it for today's Nostalgia versus Reality. I hope you like the new format, and we will be back hopefully a lot sooner than this one was.